folks, welcome to Board Game Brawl. My name is Nick, and today we're taking a look at my top 10 pure cooperative games. So I want to thank you for watching this list. I know that there's a lot of other top 10 lists out there for board games, including 4 cooperative games, but hopefully you stick around and watch the entire list. You might find a game that you've never heard of, or that you've just passed on before because it didn't seem that interesting to you, but I don't know, maybe my interest in it makes you give it a second look, because all the games I'm going to mention today during the list itself are really great games that deserve a lot of attention, and I'm a huge proponent of cooperative games. That's why I decided to make it the first top 10 list that I'm doing. I think cooperative games are a fantastic way to get to know people and work together, hopefully low tension, without some people do not like to be too competitive, so it's always great to have cooperative games on hand. And it's, of course, for families as well. We've all have horror stories of playing Risk and Monopoly growing up and just being at each other's throats, but now there are so many great cooperative games available that families don't need to play those crappy old games. And yes, I know I have a copy of Monopoly on the shelf behind me, but it's adventure time, so what are you going to do? But anyways, cooperative games are great. That's why I'm doing this list. But before we get started, I want to talk about terminology and types of cooperative games. I call this list a list of pure cooperative games, but what exactly does that mean? So, to me, my definition of a pure cooperative game is a game where all the players are working together against the game and the game's auto mechanics. It could be an evil overlord you're trying to kill. It could be trying to stop the spread of a disease or a zombie apocalypse, and just survive against something in the game, whatever it may be. So you all win or lose together and equally, and at the end of it all, job well done. Hopefully you had a very good time. No player is elevated among the others to become a sole or team winner. Now, this is sort of in contrast to a few other types of cooperative games that could be very fun but are not purely cooperative. So the first one that I'm thinking of is the Trader cooperative game, which is a mechanic I really, really, really enjoy, and it killed me to not put a couple of these games on the list, but it is a very different experience than a pure cooperative experience. The very first one I have to mention is Shadows over Camelot, which is my number 2 favorite game of all time. Spoiler alert, in case I ever do my top list of all time, but fantastic game where all the players are Knights of the Round Tables working together to defeat the forces of evil, but one amongst them may be a traitor. Now that adds an element to the game that is just not in a purely cooperative game, an element of suspicion and distrust, and overall tension that some people just don't like and can't get their heads around, especially if they're stuck as a traitor and really don't know what to do. It can be a very bad feeling for some people. I love it, but that's why it should be kept separate from purely cooperative games. Battlestar Galactica is sort of a different game, but the same idea. Some of the humans who are working together to get back to Earth are Cylons working against the rest of them. Lots of tension, suspicion, and distrust. Now, Room 25 would be another good example of this if you play it in that mode, and that's the only way to play Room 25 is suspicion mode with the guards. But I digress. Now, another type of cooperative game is the one versus all game. That's where there are several players, depending on whatever number of players you have, who are working together against one player who is like the grand enemy. And this can change depending on what game it is. If it's Fury of Dracula, then it's one player playing Dracula. The rest are the Van Helsing and Jonathan Harker and Mina, who are working together to find and kill Dracula. There's also Descent, where one player is it Overlord or Overseer, who's basically like the dungeon master and trying to maybe not kill the other players, but definitely challenge them and make them have a hard time. Then there's games like Super Dungeon Explorer, which I really, really love, where one player is the console, get it, who is basically trying to kill the heroes who are, rampaging through his or her dungeon. So one versus all. Another one special mention is Mousquetaire du Roi, where there are the 3 musketeers who are teaming up against Milady and trying to stop her schemes. Those games, for the players who are working together, feels very purely cooperative, and usually there's no player who's elevated amongst the rest, but there is that one player who's working against the rest, so that can be some people don't like that. I also like one versus all games. I'm definitely going to do a top 10 list of them eventually, but a very different feel than a purely cooperative game. Now, my least favorite mechanic that is in cooperative games is the games that are termed semi-cooperative games. This is where everyone is working together to win or lose the game, but one player will be the ultimate winner above all the rest. really do not like the mechanic. One of my favorite games of all time is Legendary, the Marvel deck building game. I really, really enjoy it. Again, everyone's working cooperatively to defeat the mastermind in his or her scheme, but one player can have the most points from destroying villains and rescuing bystanders at the end of the game and be the ultimate superhero. And they integrated it so much into the gameplay that you basically can't ignore it altogether, even if you want to, because a lot of the cards, half of their usage and half the reason why they even exist is because they let you get more points, like rescuing more bystanders. So very annoying. It's the one major issue I have with Legendary, other than the setup time. I wish they'd just dump it. There's a great new game called Castaways. It looks awesome. That also has a semi-cooperative aspect I wish it didn't have. And there's a game called Cutthroat Caverns, which is supposed to be actually a very good way of implementing semi-cooperative, because it says it right out front. You need to work together, but you also need to, trip up and kill all of your other teammates. But semi-cooperative is not a great mechanic for me, but we're here to talk about pure cooperative games. So now that I've cleared all of those definitions up, let's talk first, before we get to my top 10, about the runners-up, my 11 through 15. These are games that are really good cooperative games, but just not quite good enough for me to get into the top 10. You might disagree, and if you disagree with anything I say in this video, I urge you to comment below. I love all kinds of feedback. I love lively, spirited debate, even if it's mean-spirited. I won't be mean-spirited, but come on, come at me, bro. I don't mind. So, let's talk about number 15 on the list. We have Hanabi. So this is a Spiel des Jahres winner for 2013, and that's a really big deal. The Spiel des Jahres is probably the most prestigious board game award that there is from Essen, Germany, and it is basically awarded to a game that, I don't want to say it's family games are usually the winner, but accessible games that would be very great for families, but are good enough, ideally, that anyone would want to play them, that they have great mechanics. And, a lot of people were surprised that Hanabi was even nominated, let alone the fact that it won, because it's not a very complex game. Look, it's a little tiny box. All that's in this box is cards and a few tokens to keep track of clues and basically your life, your hit points. And in this game, it's pretty abstract. You're all working together to make sets of cards from 1 to 5 in different colors. There's really no theme to it, but you're supposed to be making fireworks displays. And you have to put them in the right order and not play any doubles. If you screw up too much, then you're going to lose life points, and you'll eventually have to end the game and just settle on whatever points you were able to get. The catch of the game is that you cannot see the cards that you have in your hand. You hold your cards outwards, facing towards the other players. The other players cannot just tell you what you have in your hand. They have to spend their turn to give you clues in whatever clever way they can, and the clues can only be numbers and colors, and hope that you understood their clue enough that when it gets back around to your turn, you play the right card or don't play the right card. It's a very, very tense game. There are people in my group who admit that it's a good game, but they won't play it because it's just too tense and stressful. I really like it. I'm always down to play, but different strokes for different folks. So that's Hanabi. Let's talk about Rune Age. So I don't think this game gets nearly enough love. Rune Age is from Fantasy Flight Games, and it's set in the universe of Terranoth, which is from the Rune games that they all have: Rune Bound, Rune Wars, Descent. They're retrofitting battle lore to be in the Rune universe. And this is another game. This is actually a deck building game, and it has different modes of play. You can do this strictly competitively. I think there's a couple other modes I can't even remember, but the way I prefer to play it is a purely cooperative game. Each player takes a faction, like elves or like barbarians and humans and stuff like that, and you have your own, like any deck building game, you're buying cards, but you have your own personal stock of cards to buy from. And what's really cool is that there's different scenarios that you're trying to work through together. Really great, really hard, in my opinion, especially depending on what scenario you pick. But check it out. I think it got overlooked. If you buy it and like it, you should definitely buy the expansion. That helps out a lot, gives a lot more variety, new factions. And, it's actually really cheap, too. This was actually, Fantasy Flight was selling this very cheaply, or I should say Target was selling it last holiday season for $10, along with a lot of other smaller Fantasy Flight games, which really surprised me that it was at Target. But if they have any more left and you see it on the shelf, pick it up. It's a steal. It's a great game. So that's Ruination Fantasy Flight. Now, this one's a little bit harder to get, but this is Shadow Rift. Now, this was I think it might have been a Kickstarter or Indiegogo's game at some point. As far as I know, you can only buy it at retail, maybe Amazon or Game Salute. But in Shadow Rift, this is another cooperative deck building game. All the players are fantasy archetype heroes like wizards and warriors and such who are trying to protect this town that is being beset by some wave of monsters. And you choose a wave of monsters at the beginning. It's like different scenarios. It could be giants, it could be wizards, it could be a necromancer and his hordes of undead. And you can only win the game by sealing these Shadow Rifts cards or by building a completely fortified wall, magic walls around the town. Really, really tough. You have to build up your power and try not to take stuff that you know the other players are going to need to make themselves better. So you have to work together constantly to make your decks efficient in the right kind of ways. Shadow Rift, check it out. I think it's another overlooked game. Pretty good. All right, now this one, Yggdrasil. The only reason this isn't higher on my list, I think, is because I haven't had a chance to play it very much. I've only played it twice at the time I'm recording this, but it impressed me so much that it really jumped up on my list. I think this is a fantastic game. Part of the reason I didn't play it much more is because it just got reprinted. That's the version that I have that included the expansion. This game is notorious for being difficult, and that is no lie. I did not win either of the two games that I played. Very, very difficult. It's got the Norse mythology theme where you're all Norse gods, all the ones that you know, and a lot you've probably never heard of, like Odin and Thor, but also like, I don't know, Freya and Sif. I mean, I don't know, tons of gods you have to choose from. And you're trying to protect the world tree Yggdrasil during the apocalypse or during Ragnarok from these 6 enemies like Loki and the Fire Giant Lord Surt and all these other guys and who are moving towards Odin's residence, and you have to beat them back and keep them from breaching certain walls. And you basically just have to run the deck out. If you can survive long enough for the deck to run out, you'll win. And there's all kinds of different things you can do on the board. It's almost like worker placement because you're taking certain actions from certain areas on the board without actually putting workers out. But it's really, I love the theme of it. It's gorgeous to look at. I wish it was miniatures, but what are you going to do? I wish every game had miniatures, but really, really hard. I'm not afraid of hard co-op. Some people in my group are, so I'm afraid of how much this is actually going to get to the table, but if I get to play it more, it's probably going to go up on my list at some point. Yggdrasil from Z-Man Games. And then finally at number 11, I'm sorry, I should be saying the number after each of these, but at number 11 is Forbidden Desert. Now, Forbidden Desert is the sequel to Forbidden Island, and I like Forbidden Island a lot, but it's probably on its way out of my collection because Forbidden Desert does all the same things that Forbidden Island does, but does it better. Now, this is from Matt Leacock, who also did Pandemic, which may or may not be higher on my list, but in Forbidden Desert, you crash land in a desert, with all of your buddies, looking for this lost civilization that was buried by the sand, and now you have no way to get home. You're dying of thirst and of exposure, and now you need to find the pieces of this ancient airship that this lost civilization had, combine them all together to escape together. But while you're doing this, sandstorms are rolling through, and there's a really neat mechanic of the sandstorm going around the modular board and putting sand everywhere and making it more difficult for you to find stuff. And you lose if someone dies of thirst. You lose if the sand runs out in the sand stack. I mean, it's a tough game, but that's another reason I like it. It's much more difficult than Forbidden Island, but really great. Lots of cool decisions. Really great for families if you want to bump it up a level from Forbidden Island, which was even more family friendly, but really great. You should definitely check it out. New game just came out this year from GameRate. And so, without further ado, let's get to my top 10 list of pure cooperative games. Alright, clocking in at number 10 is Darkest Night from Victory Point Games. Now, Victory Point Games is known for their war games and also for solitaire games, and indeed you can play this one solitaire as well, but of course it really shines as a cooperative game, and it really made me pay more attention to the company and what they're capable of other than war games, because this doesn't feel like a war game at all. Instead, this actually feels quite a bit like Pandemic, but with a theme. Even though it's not as tight a game as Pandemic, it's got a theme that I really, really like, and that's, you're all fantasy archetype characters going around a kingdom trying to stop a necromancer who's dropping these evil blights all around, and you have to stop him before those blights eventually overrun the entire map and overrun the monastery, which is the last holy ground left in the kingdom. But what I really, really like, and I love any game where characters have special powers, and this game is no exception. You can choose all kinds of different characters, especially if you have the expansion, which I certainly recommend getting if With an Inner Light is the name of the expansion, if you like this game at all. But you have all these different characters, and you've got the knight, the paragon, the monk, the wizard, the priest, the prince. They all have different types of abilities that are all useful in different ways, and I really love that. The components, I mean, like all Victory Point games, are not all that great, but they don't really need to be. I think that the game is very solid. It can be very difficult depending on how you play the game, the character roles that you have, whether you play with some of the new modes from the expansion that increase the difficulty even more. Just a great thematic game. I had a lot of fun with this one. Darkest Night from Victory Point Games. Alright, my number 9. Speaking of the Spiel des Jahres winners, let's look at the Kenner Spiel des Jahres winner for 2013, and that's Legends of Andor. Now, the Kenner Spiel des Jahres, as opposed to the Spiel des Jahres, is not necessarily for family or accessible games, but for more complex, heavier games than that category. And Legends of Andor, it's not that difficult or complex a game, but it does require quite a bit of strategy. It's very puzzly. Now, it is a fantasy game where you all take the typical different roles of the wizard, the fighter, the dwarf, and all of that stuff. And you have different quests that you're trying to work through, moving around the map, trying to kill monsters, but not always necessarily. The interesting thing about this game and why it's very puzzly is that everything you do takes time. Time moving up the quest marker and unlocking different parts of the quest. And if you don't finish your objectives before the quest ends, then you fail. And that can be very difficult. The first time you play any scenario, you're going to lose because you're just not going to be able to wrap your head around what you're supposed to do and do it in the most efficient way possible. But future playthroughs, you'll be able to get it. The game is very intuitive. Players have different powers. It's all about dice rolling, but what you can do with the dice is very different. I love the way that you move your tracker up and power up your characters. Very, very beautiful board, beautiful components. I mean, I wish there was actual miniatures and not cardboard standees, but they work. They do a very cool thing where you can play any character as either gender, including the standee that's out on the board and your character card. Very nice. I like to see that kind of stuff. A very, very fun game. Definitely you should check it out if you haven't already. Legends of Andor from Fantasy Flight Games in America. Check it out. Alright, my number 8 game, I don't have the original box for anymore, so I have it in the expansion box, and that's Pandemic. I have it in the On the Brink box for the new version of the second edition, and I had both versions of the original edition of the game. This is all the new version now. Basically, they reprinted this game this year with just new components, updated art, infuriated a lot of people who had spent a lot of money on the older version since it wasn't all that old, but I don't know, I like the new components and the new artworks. But anyways, no matter what version of the game that you play, this is a fantastic game, and you've probably already heard of this game even if you're not too familiar with board games, because you can find this on the shelves at Target. It's become that popular. Will Wheaton did a tabletop episode of Pandemic that just skyrocketed this game into the stratosphere of popularity. They have another new expansion for the new edition that came out called In the Lab, which I don't have yet, but I've heard good things about. But in Pandemic, basically, you are all researchers and scientists and first responders who are working together to stop a global outbreak of 4 different diseases that are all represented in sort of an abstract way by cubes all across the board. The board looks like a world map, and you have to move around and try to stop these diseases from breaking out too much, while all at the same time, the only way that you're going to win the game is by actually finding a cure for all of the diseases. But that's very, very difficult. And the more the diseases outbreak, the less time that you have. You're eventually going to hit a level where either there's too many outbreaks and the game ends that way, or you run out of cards in your player deck, which is basically represents the time that you have to actually take care of these diseases before too many people die. So the game is all about efficiency. It's all about working together and using your special powers, more special powers, I love that, using your special powers wisely and in concert with each other. Now, this game is notorious for having an alpha player problem, where one player who's very good at the game or has at least played the game a little bit more than the other players starts directing the other people on what to do. You just need to tamp that down as early as possible, or if you're like me, you'll be in a group full of alpha gamers, so we're all telling each other what to do all at the same time, so that works out. But Pandemic is a really great game. It's really absolutely deserved its status and mega popularity at this point. Definitely, I hope that more and more modern families pick this up at the shelf at Target, or maybe even soon Walmart, over games like Monopoly and Risk, because it's just wonderful. Pandemic, my number 8. Alright, my number 7 is also in an expansion box, and that is Conquest of Planet Earth. This is the Apocalypse expansion box. It's from Flying Frog Games, and an interesting note about this game is that it has 2 different gameplay modes, and the gameplay mode that the rules are pretty much written for and telling you to do is the competitive mode. And in competitive mode, you're all different alien races who are trying to destroy the planet Earth in various different ways, trying to get the most points by the end of the game. I don't even know how the end of the game is in that, but if you have the most points, you're the ultimate alien, you conquer planet Earth. Okay, I have no interest in playing the competitive mode at all, that's why I don't know too much more about it. Now, the full cooperative mode is how I play this game, and it is a fantastic game in that regard. In that regard, you're all still aliens who are trying to conquer Earth, but you're working together and pooling together your points to meet a certain threshold before the humans who are on autopilot finish their super weapon to wipe all of you out. I love all the different alien races that give you different powers, and using them together with the other players and trying to use your powers on the other players to help you out. Very fun, very thematic game. By coincidence, I actually traded away another Flying Frog game for this game, Last Night on Earth. Last Night on Earth was very boring, and I have no interest in a lot of Flying Frog's other games. This game is fantastic. If you passed over this game because you knew all of other Flying Frog's other games were just really cheesy and campy and not worth the time, well, this is cheesy and campy, but it's worth the time. Really love this game. Wish they would do a new edition that was less fiddly and took out all the competitive components, because who needs them? Because this is just a really great game. My number 7, Conquest of Planet Earth. Coming in at number 6, the box is getting bigger. This is Robinson Crusoe, Adventures on the Cursed Island. Now, this is kind of a notorious game right now because it's very hard to find. Z-Man hasn't been doing, well, I suppose they've been doing the best they can because this game is just so popular, but they haven't been able to get a lot of these games in stock for its American release. It's actually been out for a year over in Europe, but it's very popular for a very good reason. That's it's an excellent game. So you play the titular story characters of Robinson Crusoe and his crew on stranded on an island. There's all kinds of different scenarios in the box, which I really like, and depending on what the scenario is, you're trying to do something else. It could just be surviving, that's the basic scenario, until help arrives. It could be trying to put all of these crosses up all over the islands to remove this fog curse. It could be trying to fend off cannibals. All kinds of different things. They have expansions coming out that offer even more stuff. The Voyage of the Beagle expansion, which is Darwin's ship. So I love games with different scenarios. And this game is hard. It's very, very, very hard. And what I like about this so much is that there's not a lot of great artwork in this game. And the scenarios, even though, yeah, they tell you what you're supposed to be doing, there's not really a lot of storyline involved with them. The characters are kind of one-dimensional. The theme of the game comes out through the mechanics and what you're trying to do. It just feels so awesome when and it is a very complex game. There's lots and lots of bits and moving parts, but you're working together to explore the island and get food and build shelter and hunt for animals and build stuff and make items. And you need to do 20 things and you have 2 actions. It's that kind of feeling. And I just really loved it. Whenever you do something and accomplish something, it feels so awesome when you finally do it. Everyone rejoices because it helps everybody out. Just so the theme comes out from the player interaction and the mechanics, and not many games can say that. A lot of games have a very pasted on theme. This one, the artwork and everything may be pasted on, but the theme is definitely strong. Really enjoy it, really hard. I don't know if I'll ever win it again, but Robinson Crusoe, Adventure on the Cursed Island, my number 6. Alright, so moving on from Robinson Crusoe, where the theme mostly comes out from the mechanics and the player interaction, let's go to a game where the theme is dripping off of everything. The mechanics, the artwork, the components, everything, and that is Mice and Mystics from Plaid Hat Games. Now, this is a fully cooperative game where all of the players are fantasy heroes in this kingdom that are shrunk down to the size of mice, and they basically have to work through the bowels of this castle, completing different scenarios as parts of a continuing storyline to defeat this evil sorceress. And it's really great. This is a great game for kids. The storyline is not too dark, but it's a very good story even for adults. Great components, great dice, great little miniatures. The mechanics make you feel like you're playing a little encapsulated form of Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. Very simple but very fun, building up your character and taking that character with all the special abilities through to further chapters. There's actually, you can download an audio track to listen to. I think his name is Rich Summer from Mad Men, reading the different storyline parts if you don't want to read out loud. There's an expansion coming out soon. I can't wait. This is a really great game for kids and adults alike. Beautiful everything, artwork, components. You should definitely give it a look-see. Plaid Hat Games knocked it out of the park again. That is Mice and Mystics, my number 5. Alright, clocking in at number 4 is what is, in my opinion, among the many, many, many zombie games that are out there, this is the only one you ever need to bother with or waste your time on, and that is Zombicide. This is from Cool Mini or Not and Guillotine Games, and this was one of the most successful Kickstarter projects ever. Season 2 was leagues away, even more successful, one of the most successful board gaming projects ever on Kickstarter, and for what I think are good reasons. First off, this game is just gorgeous component-wise, awesome little miniatures and tiles, modular boards. There's tons of different scenarios you can go through. You can go through many scenarios that they offer in this box, or you can make your own scenarios using all the components that they have. And the basic idea of the game is that you are all survivors in a zombie apocalypse who are just trying to meet some sort of objective. It could just be living, it could be escaping through part of the city, it could be finding food, it could be rescuing other survivors. Whatever the scenario may be, even though the storyline may not be that great, how this all plays out is really, really awesome, because no other zombie game makes me feel like I'm in a zombie apocalypse like this one does. You start off and you're just out on the city streets or in a building somewhere, and you go along, and a couple of zombies will come out, and you'll open up a building and there's a bunch of zombies. But you defeat a couple of them, and you're like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. We found some weapons, we're good to go. But the zombies keep coming, and then all of a sudden you can't defeat every single one of them in a turn, and you have to kind of run away. But then more zombies come out. Then you go into another building where you have to go to get your objective, and that room is full of zombies. And then tougher zombies come out, big mutant zombies come out. And then all of a sudden you stand up and look at the board, and it's just full of zombies coming from every street, every corner. But you still need to win that game, son. You need to get back in there. You need to find those objectives, rescue those people, get to the other side of the street, whatever you need to do. Really, really, really great thematic game as far as I'm concerned. It does have a couple of rules problems people complain about with having to shoot your allies first in an adjacent square, or player elimination, but really, it's just a lot of fun. What can I say? This is pure fun. I'm totally willing to overlook its flaws. I can't wait for Season 2, which should be getting to me any moment, which I'll immediately review it. Zombicide from Cool Mini or Not. This is my number 4. right, number 3, definitely the newest game on my list in the most obnoxiously large box, and that is Pathfinder the Adventure card game. So some people probably will scoff at the idea that this game, which has only came out at Gen Con, so it's only been a couple of months since it came out, that this would be so high on my list. But let me tell you, after playing this a number of times, it is a fantastic game, from the theme to the cards, the components, and how the game mechanics, how it actually plays out. This is the game that you're going to bring out when you want to play a tabletop role-playing game, but no one else in your board gaming group is anywhere remotely interested. They will like this, because this game, it's not a deck building game, but you are making yourself better by adding cards to your deck that you carry over to future scenarios. That's how you level up your characters. And just like in a tabletop role-playing game, you're trying to find and defeat a villain and all of that villain's henchmen, and you're going to different locations that have special abilities, and you're finding gear, and you're fighting monsters, you're rolling a lot of dice. It's just a fun game. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of different scenarios. There's all kinds of expansion packs on the way, different adventure paths, and supposedly I think the idea is that they're actually going to release a big box like this every couple years that's going to have a brand new adventure path. Like this box here is only for this Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path, but nevertheless, it's going to be one of those sad situations where they're just Paizo, the company that makes this, is just going to keep getting my money, because this is a fantastic game and I cannot wait to play more. I hope I can get it on the table even more and blow through the rest of the first scenario pack that's in here. Pathfinder Adventure card game. This is my number 3, proudly. Well, I mentioned one of the runner-ups for this list was Yggdrasil, which was notorious for its difficulty, and right there, neck and neck with that game, is Ghost Stories, for just being a brutally hard game. This is my number 2. It was probably my number 1 at a certain point as well, and definitely in my list of my favorite games altogether, period. But as a cooperative game, this one really shines. First, I love the theme. You are all monks in like feudal China who are trying to protect this town from this evil dark god who is trying to awaken, and he's throwing swarms and swarms of ghosts and evil malefic creatures at this town from all sides. And you as the monks have to use your special abilities and get aid from all of the townsfolk to try and push back the swarms of ghosts long enough to get to the incarnation of this dark evil god, who, if you can defeat before the rest of the deck of ghosts runs out, you will win. But getting there is easier said than done. And starts off the game, you get a few ghosts coming out, and it's like, this isn't so bad. Then a few more ghosts come out, sort of like the zombie side thing example I was saying. A few more ghosts come out, and you're like, okay, we're all right still, let's just keep going, chugging through it. And then you just get to a point where there's just ghosts on everyone's player board all over the place. Can't possibly deal with them all, but you gotta hold on, you gotta keep going, and then you gotta save some resources because that incarnation is coming out and it's gonna be nasty, and you never know, it's random, so you never know how powerful that incarnation is gonna be. There's a couple of awesome expansions for this too. One of them actually turns this into a 1 versus all game, which is very interesting, but the purely cooperative version is the best way to play it. Really fantastic. Love the theme, love the components, love the difficulty, even though other players in my group hate it. But Ghost Stories, I can't recommend it enough. My number 2. And finally, we have arrived at number 1. And if you like the same kind of games that I like, and you've kind of been on board with all the games I've been talking about so far, you've probably noticed one that is conspicuously absent, and couldn't imagine that to be number 1, but it definitely is for me, and for what I think are good reasons. So, without further ado, it is Sentinels of the Multiverse. This is a fantastic card game where every player is a different superhero on a superhero team who is trying to defeat a villain. Now, this has been done a couple other times. This has been done by Marvel Legendary, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video. which is a cooperative game but has semi-cooperative elements, so it wasn't really eligible for this list. DC Comics deck building game is a purely competitive game where you're superheroes trying to defeat villains, but you're working against each other for some reason. I don't know, whatever. But Sentinels of the Multiverse is purely cooperative. You each take a different type of hero, and it's not a deck building game, but each hero has their own deck of cards. And what I love the most about this is that every deck is different. And you're not just playing down cards to say, all right, +3 power, and I'm going to attack him, blah, blah, blah. No, every deck is themed a different way and works in a different way. If you're the supernatural hero Night Mist, you're going to be, foreseeing cards from the top of your deck and using the numbers on those cards to give yourself bonuses or protect the other players. If you're Legacy, you're going to be taking hits for the other players and being very defensive. If you're Night Mist, or not Night Mist, I forget some of them, but the Bunker, the Iron Man type character, you're going to be all about attack, and getting great equipment to upgrade yourself. And there's so many. I have like every expansion at this point. There's so many different characters, but even just in the base game, you have a lot of options, and all the villains are different as well. And they have some really cool mechanics on some of the villains, and trying to deal with all their henchmen. And there's an environment deck, so every game is different. You will never play the same game of this, even if you fight the same villain. You're going to have different heroes doing different things, working together differently, different environment, throwing wild cards out there. Now, no one likes the art in this game. I mean, let's just be honest. If you say you like the art, it's because you're just, trying to defend the company, and I get that. The art is awful, but eventually you'll kind of forget it, and it is kind of cheesy and goofy and kind of fits with the comic book theme. But despite that, really great game, really tight. Really, it could be a very, very tough game depending on the scenario that you choose. But if you don't want it to be so tough, just choose an easier villain and work together with to find out what heroes are best for you, so you can adjust the difficulty that way. Love this game. Love the theme. Sentinels of the Multiverse, one of the best games I own, and definitely the best cooperative game I have ever played. So that is my top 10 list of pure cooperative games. This is the first of hopefully many top 10 lists that I'm going to do for all different kinds of topics. I've tried to do ones that I haven't really seen much of, like I wanted to make this one pure cooperative. I might do a one versus all list. I might do a list of just particular themes like deck building games, things like that. Things that I really enjoy, that I'm really passionate about. And I hope that I can, if you're not passionate about it, maybe you will be after you watch these videos. But thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Thank you for subscribing if you already have. Please share. Thank you for sharing if you already have. I really appreciate each and every person that views one of my videos. I really mean that. Thank you so much. This has been Board Game Brawl. My name is Nick. Definitely more to come in the future. And I'm reminding you, as always, don't just watch videos. Get out there and game every day and in every way, especially cooperatively.